Hello, all my friends, and welcome to another episode of Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn, the Kitchen Witch. Thank you for being here. Um, I'm really very, very grateful for all of you in the audience and all of you that are tuning in and hanging out with us, month after month. Can you do me a quick favor? It would be amazing if you subscribe to this channel wherever you are listening or watching. The subscriptions make the difference and they help us to continue to do what we're doing, get this podcast out there for more folks to enjoy. And you can also support us by clicking the support us link and help me bring you more great information, conversations, and inspirations. So please help me keep this going by subscribing and liking and hitting all the buttons and support us if you can. We appreciate it. And don't forget, you can learn more about me and food magic and the power of kitchen witchery by visiting me directly at cucinaaurora.com and at Cucina Aurora on all social media. Today we have an old friend, and I'm so happy that he's here, Nicholas Pearson. He has been immersed in all aspects of the mineral kingdom for more than 30 years. As one of the leading voices in crystal healing today, he offers a unique blend of science and spirituality alongside grounded, practical approach to working with crystals. He is absolutely wonderful. I'm so happy to have him back. Nicholas, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad when I reached out, you said yes.
Of course. Hello, open invitation. I mean, come on. And I have to say, just before we hit the record button, we were talking about how our lives are absolute madness. So I'm really glad that we could make this happen.
Yeah, it's the schedule is tight. I often tell people that the person who writes my schedule is more optimistic about how many hours in the day than the person who actually has to work that schedule. Sadly, they're both me. Um,
Yes. Yes. My boss is a real witch. Yeah,
relatable.
no, she doesn't give me a break at all ever. And that's me. I don't, I think us entrepreneurs and writers, we are the only people in the world that like quit the 9 to 5 job to work 24/7, 365. And everybody's like, oh, you run your own your business, or you're a writer, or you do this, or you do that. It must be so nice to make your own schedule. And you're like, I never shut it off.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, especially someone like you're so creative, and the work that you do in all of your books and all of your crystal healing, like you're, even when you're at rest, you're probably still thinking and creating magical shit in your brain.
Yeah, last Thursday, I remember it was Thursday, I was leaving a rehearsal. This little idea creeps into the back of my head for a book that I have no space to write because I'm writing another one. I have something already planned for after this, and it's just like tapping me on the shoulder a little bit more every day. A couple nights ago, laying in bed, trying to shut off my brain and fall asleep finally after an hour of reading. Um, I got out of bed to go write down things from this book to just hold it in sacred trust for someday when I will get around to it. Um, it's it's great to have all the ideas. Realistically, I've got more ideas than I think I will ever accomplish in this lifetime. So we'll see what happens. Just
Which is
tough it out.
good.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's the plight of a creative person, is to have all these things you want to do, and especially in the magical world, to be like, oh, I want to share this knowledge, or I want to explore that, or research this thing, and talk about it with people. But in reality, like, when do we sleep?
I've never been a very good sleeper my whole life. I remember very vivid memories of, I wouldn't say getting yelled at, but getting a really stern talking to as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old for staying up all night reading. And it wasn't that I elected not to sleep so I could read. I elected to read because I could not sleep. And I get caught at, some odd hour of the morning. Uh, and like I just couldn't sleep.
Yeah.
So the same is true. I do try to get a good 6 or 7 hours of being horizontal a night. Even if I'm not unconscious the whole time, the horizontal hours matter.
Horizontal hours, the way gravity is pulling on your body matters,
Yeah.
right? Like especially like my job is so physical. If I'm making olive oil or I'm making, product at Cucina Aurora, like my job is so physical that if I can lay down, just I don't want gravity to be pulling on me vertically, but it can pull on me horizontally. And then I have to have 8,000 pillows. I can never get comfortable and I can never shut my brain off. I find that I have my most prolific inspirations in the weirdest moments, that they're not in the middle of the night. It's like in the shower or while I'm driving, when my brain is kind of in sort of a meditative state. And then I have this brilliant idea and I'm like, oh crap, I have to write that down. Do you find that too? Or are you a middle of the night person?
Oh, well, my very first book started out as an idea I had on a commute to work. I pulled the car over and I pulled out my phone and I typed things down. And then eventually, like a week later, I came back to it. And a couple weeks after that, I held a whole chapter, which had never happened to me before in my life. I tried for many years to attempt to write a book before the seven archetypal stones started to come together. And yeah, flower essences from the witch's garden was a classic. Shampooing my hair in the shower, like it's such a cliche. It was like
Right.
early pandemic era, and I was working a lot, but I wasn't like public facing working a lot, so I
Yeah.
had more time and energy in my life. There was like less of the decompressing after a day at the shop kind of thing. And so I used all that time around my workspace differently. And I wrote my largest book in 9 months. And
Wow.
so a lot of ideas have kind of come out of those strange liminal moments, whether it's trying to drift off at night or, drive from point A to point B or anything else. Even the book I'm working on right now, I've had a lot of those aha moments in transit to like rehearsal. I'll be listening to a
Mm.
podcast on things like East Asian medicine and embodied practice and East Asian spirituality. I'll go, well, that idea from so and so, and I have to like pause the podcast and recite the light bulb moment that I've had in response to that
Yeah.
until I get to my destination. So then I can pull out my phone and type into my draft of notes for whatever
Yeah.
topic I'm working on, who said what and what that made me think of, so I can like tie those threads together when I sit down to write at another point.
I love that. I tend to do the same thing with food and recipes. So like if I go out to dinner somewhere and I eat something that's really interesting or something I wouldn't normally like make for myself, generally if I go out somewhere, I try to order food that is something I don't make. Right. So that I can be like, oh, this is really interesting. Cause, like I don't go out to eat Italian food. I cook my own Italian food. That's stupid. Why would I go eat somebody else's meatballs? So then I'm like, oh, they use this and oh, what do I taste in there? Oh, okay. So now I'm going to write that down. Okay. I've got to try to recreate this and now go back through and go, okay, what kind of magical properties do these foods have? Or could I use this particular recipe or this dish for, you know, uh, prosperity magic or for cleansing magic? Like what avenue will it fit into? So I do like, you know, take the idea and then fit it into a category or have a category and then try to fit that recipe into that magical working that I'm
Mm.
trying to do. But you work in so many different spaces. So obviously everybody, for those who don't know you, you've got the crystal, your huge crystal guy, like the crystal healing, your the I'm blanking on your most the crystal. I could see it in my head. It's on my shelf behind me. Your first crystal book, Crystal Basics.
Crystal Basics, yeah,
Crystal
that's
Basics. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
famous
Thank you.
one.
I apologize. Hopefully the producer will cut out my little brain fart there. Crystal Basics. So that's like, huge. But then you also have the flower essences and all of that. What is inspiring you right now? Because you've got a lot going on and you have a new book out. Um, and it's the witching. Hang on. See, I'm all over the place, Nicholas. I apologize. Witching stones, right? So you've got this new book, The Witching Stones, which is very, very cool. So let's talk about what's inspiring you right now and how this book was inspired. What made you want to do
Yeah.
this?
This book has kind of an interesting, we'll say, genesis as well. Um, One of the main reasons that I wrote this book is because I was really, really sick of the book that I was already working on.
No
In like the
way.
Yeah, in the best way possible though. So in 2020, February 2020, Crystal Basics came out. So my sixth book. It was doing really, really well. And it was also a really strange time to be a human being on planet Earth and
Mm-hmm.
seeing, witnessing, supporting, helping people through that ongoing journey since then. I noticed that like the biggest trend in like what people wanted dealt with things related to personal safety, protection,
Mm.
a sense of security, whether it was social, emotional, energetic, you name it. And so I thought, I have my own kinds of protection magic protocols and ones that are like very specifically crystal oriented. So I just figured I would write that book, a book about crystals for protection. And I eventually did, but I started it in 2020 and it came out in the beginning of this year, 2025. It has never taken me that long to see a project through from start to finish. Now, in my defense, I did write and publish two other books in the meanwhile. That is true, but this one just kept getting delay after delay after delay. Some of it was logistics. Some of it was just I had no space or energy left because I was wiped out from teaching and eventually from traveling and promoting other
Yeah,
books.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I got an invitation from Judica Illes, editor at large at Wiser Books, to
yeah.
write a short essay, emphasis on short, um, for Christine Cunningham Ashworth's book,
Yes,
Scott Cunningham, The Path Taken,
yes,
about his legacy with crystals. And it was it was a really momentous year for me in a lot of ways. Uh, that year was the year that my husband and I got married. It was in the kind of lead up to um, this magical retreat that I took with my best friend and led in the kind of southwestern part of the United Kingdom. We were kind of centered at Chalice Well. We were doing all of this work with the stones of the land itself, not just, the really cool crystals that you find, but really humble things like flint and granite and marble and slate and chalk. And this notion of being close to the land was important to me. So I wrote this little contribution for Christine's book. It was probably the best thing I'd written in a solid year. Um, Better than my own wedding vows, for sure.
I'm sure
Um,
that's not true.
and what came of it was a desire to just do something different. So
Mm,
I'd been sitting with this project. I was working on a class about flint that was going to tie together some stuff that didn't fit into this retreat that I'd taught earlier in the year. And as I was kind of mapping out what that project might look like and what kind of stones it might entail, I thought, you know what? This has so much kinship with Harold Roth's The Witching
yeah,
Herbs that I'd love to make the witching stones out of it. I read that book in those kind of, we'll say, intermediary years, the great pause of 2020 forward. We're not really out of it. We're just in a new chapter of it.
yeah,
And I really wanted to do something that was my own take on it, and not just recreate Roth's work, but substituting rocks for plants, but really like make it my own. And I pitched it to Judica really informally, and she says, I actually think Weiser would really love this. Can you get me a real proposal?
yeah.
And so I did. The challenge was I had to, of course, finish writing my protection crystal book so I could write literally anything else. And
Right?
that That actually worked out really well. I'm very pleased with how Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense came out. Seems to have been pretty well received. I love that it incorporated so much of what I've learned over the last few years. If I'd written
Yeah.
this book all at once in 2020, it would not be the book that it is today, and I'm glad.
Yeah.
But it also kind of led me in a direction that we'll say isn't purely love and light, that we can look at crystals through a
Yeah.
lens that is serious,
Yeah.
that rooted in a cult tradition, that is, willing to show up for the depth and breadth of the human experience, because the human experience is not all love and light. And if you think it is, like, what lies are you telling to yourself, and
Yeah.
or what lies are being told to you?
Yeah.
So there's some of that in Crystals for Psychic Self-Defense, but I also wanted to like take that even further in the Witching Stones, and especially draw inspiration from history, folklore, uh, medieval and earlier literature, the occult traditions from, I mean, many parts of the world. It's definitely kind of, we'll say, pan-European centric, especially Western Europe, but there's, there's more to it than just those traditions. And a lot of the stones are incredibly ordinary ones.
Yeah.
Hagstones, salt,
Yeah.
uh, things that we probably have nearby if we'll just stop and look for them. And if not, they won't break the bank. Now, of course, there's some precious gems in there. We've got emeralds and we've got quartz and we've got moonstone,
Sure.
but really it was about finding magic in stone, like with a lowercase s. What is the rock beneath you, and where is the magic in that? And if we can start there, everything else is really easy to find the enchantment in.
I think that is so important. And again, I think during the since the pandemic times, I don't want to say during the pandemic times because reality has seemed to have shifted. The world right now is unlike anything I think any of us could have expected or predicted, magically or otherwise. And in my experience, everything for me in my craft has sort of shifted back to okay, how do we maintain safety, support, comfort, the safety of others, in our communities, in our homes? How do we just? I don't want to use the word survive, but it's a lot more of becoming closer to what is available and going more inward and being more present in the now, right? At least in my own personal craft. So I think there is something very important about realizing the energy and the power of what you actually have, what is available and accessible. And these types of, like you said, sort of, not, you don't want to use the word lesser, but kind of less grandiose. Most people don't think about, unless you're a kitchen witch, you don't generally think about salt um, in a magical way, right? I mean, people use salt, in spell work for protection and stuff, but there's a lot more to it energetically. Um, so I think it's a great take on that. And I'm going to refer, you sent me a bunch of really great talking points. And because I'm so interested in this, I do want to dive into those talking points. Um, Before we get into the content of the book, right? Let's define a few key terms: stone, crystal, rock, and gem. Are
Sure.
they different? What should we be using terminology wise? And can we use them interchangeably? And should we?
So I think, can we, should we, first and foremost, nobody's here to police other people's language. Yes, some of these terms have very specific definitions in specialized settings, but colloquially, like the International Mineralogical Association's Committee for New Minerals names, and whatever else is not going to like knock on your door and be like, actually, this is a mineraloid and not a rock. Um, where we've disqualified this as a valid mineral species, so you should really be calling it a varietal. Like no one's going to do that. If you're writing a peer-reviewed paper, it's a different question. But
Right?
realistically, let's talk about the the definitions and the subsequent connotations of some of these terms. So a crystal is usually a solid substance. It has a regular composition, so it's the same stuff all the way through, and a repeating symmetrical structure. That's its crystal lattice. Now, given enough space and time and resources, we're going to find some external faces that meet at regular angles that form, those kind of prismatic shapes that we associate with crystals. So, like you think of the shape of a cluster of amethyst, or
Mm,
a rhombohedron of calcite, or the perfect little cube that is fluorite or pyrite or halite salt. Those are crystal faces because they're large enough for us to see, but even when we think of something like an agate or a jasper, they're made out of microscopic crystals. They're just too small and packed too close together for us to see with our naked eyes, but they're still bound by a lot of the same laws. Now, a mineral is what happens when a crystal it meets two more criteria. One, it is made by Mother Nature, and two, it is inorganic in nature. So we have calcium phosphate. Functionally, it's fluorapatite in our teeth and bones, but it's organic, even though it's made by nature. But it's organic, so not technically a mineral. The ice in your freezer is inorganic, but it's not made by natural processes. But ice in a glacier, technically a mineral, because it meets all of the other requirements. So minerals have discrete crystal structures, specific chemical formulas, and yes, there can be a little bit of wiggle room there. A small amount of this could substitute for a small amount of that, but it's still, pretty narrow definition. And then because of those two features, there's going to be a number of other things that we can identify about a mineral that make it unique. Its hardness, its specific gravity or its density, the way it interacts with light, not just in
hmm.
terms of color, but its refractive index and all kinds of other fun things. Now, rocks are aggregates of minerals. They're what happens when we take bits of minerals and jumble them together. You can have something like granite, which is mostly a mixture of quartz, some kind of mica, and some kind of feldspar. But granites can also have dozens and dozens of other minerals. I have a granite countertop the next room over that has large garnets in it. And I love a little splash of red. That's how I knew this was the house we were going to rent. I saw those
Yeah.
garnets. We had a conversation as I'm like nodding and smiling while the property manager is talking to me. Like, no, no,
You're
the
like,
garnets
no.
already told me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as far as like rock versus mineral, minerals are specific, they are unified, they are cohesive. Rocks are variable in composition and texture and appearance. They're mixtures of things. So it's the difference between like a soloist with our mineral and an ensemble with a rock. So we've got just the violin versus the string quartet,
Wow.
or something else. So
Such a good analogy.
right. Uh, but then we get to this pesky little word that is stone.
Mm,
And this word is deliciously vague. It comes from a very, very ancient linguistic root that means to congeal or to harden. And it connotes hard fragments of the earth. That could be a lot of things. It could be rocks, it could be minerals, it could be things that are kind of in between and betwixt them. Because some materials like opal and natural glasses like obsidian, they fail to meet all of the criterias of one or the other. So stones are this inert part of our landscape, and yet at the same time, there's something more.
mm,
Stone is the original tool, probably the original shelter, some of the first pigment, definitely some of the first ornaments. Stone
yeah.
is something that has coexisted with humankind since the beginning of time. So often when we hear the word stone, particularly in more scholarly contexts, it often implies some sort of human geological relationship. We think
Hmm.
of stone works, stone circles, standing stones, stone tools, or lithic artifacts. We think of
Yeah.
gemstones,
Yeah.
stone structures, building stones, cobblestones. They're not just bits of the environment, but now it's what happens when humans and the environment interact.
Right.
And the idea of putting the kind of stone part of this forward in the project was one, it opened up the definition. It wasn't just the witching minerals or the witching rocks or the witching organic gem materials. It was the witching stones. Um, and so it gave me the option to really explore any of these hard fragments of the earth and find the ones that just seem to have some of the deepest threads of magic running through them.
Thank you for those definitions. You've taught me a lot. I feel like I'm flashing back to like earth science in high school where I wasn't paying attention. And now I am very much paying attention. And I'm thinking about those different structures and all these different, uh, I'm thinking about what I have. I am looking right here, right across from my desk here. What do I have? I have a salt lamp. I have a big chunk of amethyst. I've got a quartz candle holder and a selenite candle holder. And those are just the things that I can see that are right here in front of me. And I'm going, oh my goodness. So that's the salt would be a crystal. And is the selenite's a crystal? That's a crystal. Oh, look at it's very cool. And then I have like a little container that's got a bunch of rocks in it. And I would say they're rocks, like they're just things I've collected, just rocks. But that is so cool for those definitions and to understand that. Um, oh my goodness, there's marble sitting right in front of me. But see, now I'm gonna see completely differently now because of you, Nicholas. Um, so what are some of the historic ways that stones, and we're gonna use stones right as a blanket term for right now, right? Um, that have been used in magical practices. So what are those historic ways?
We have evidence of ritual use of stone, of rock, of mineral, of fossil that extends back a stupefying amount of time. With quartz in particular, there is evidence of some sort of ritual significance that is more than 200,000 years in age. There's some debate over the exact date
Wow.
of a particular site, but it might be more than a quarter of a million years old. So this is before Homo sapiens.
Wow.
We have ritual use of particular kinds of silicified fossils that are 350 to 450,000 years old.
Oh my.
So almost a half million years. So we're talking Homo habilis, Homo erectus, way before the likes of Homo sapiens were here. Stones have had symbolic value. And how do we know this? Because of their positioning, the way they are interred with human remains or non-human remains, the way they have been worked to reveal a particular quality or feature in the stone. Can we know exactly what those ritual uses or symbolic interpretations were? We can't know. We can take some educated guesses, but we can't really know.
Hmm.
So, so given that we have such a long tradition of stone magic, of this kind of magical ritual use of gems and and all sorts of other assorted geological materials, um, there's so many examples. We see one of the primary uses, a common thread throughout all of history, including today, is turning to certain kinds of stones for protection.
Mm.
These are in like the earliest iterations, they are materials that we often associate with unusual phenomena, like maybe the way that flint develops a sharp edge when struck, or the way that you can ignite fire with it. We might look to
Yeah.
something like what were once known as formed stones or fossils from the Latin fossilis, meaning something dug up. So fossil didn't just mean remains of living things, especially because for a long time people didn't think they actually were remains of living things, but that's a separate story. But they were phenomenal stones because they had an unusual phenomenon associated with them. So you're going to find things like our fossil urchins and fossil ammonites that have been connected to protective rites for millennia upon millennia. You're going to find, of course, the precious gems and the gems with unusual properties like hagstones, which have their natural holes kind of pierced through them. They have this other quality to them. So any
Hmm.
stone that was somehow unusual, that was abnormal in the best kind of way,
Yeah.
uh, was
Mystical. Like you
exactly
can't, they couldn't explain it,
it because
right?
it touched the unexplained. It also gave
Yeah.
agency over the unexplained. So this might be used for protection. This might be used for healing. This might be used for communing with the gods. This might be used in funerary rites as a kind of travel insurance to the abode of the ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
It might be used for protecting your livestock as well as your home and your family. We find so many really charming kind of folk magic uses for common stones,
Mm-hmm.
like urchins being lined up on mantelpieces. They look like little tiny loaves of bread or little buns. And so it was thought they would ensure that your kitchen always had an abundant supply of food because, unlike bread, it doesn't go stale.
Right.
Um, and so it lasts forever.
Right.
We find, the use of salt in blessing and banishing, as well as in abundance and healing and love and lust.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
ordinary human life, those are the things we've always cared about. There's this kind of romanticized idea of the past that somehow it was more magical, that people were somehow more enlightened, but people are just people. So the same needs that we might be addressing by going to visit the crystal shop or to look in a book of spells, those are the same needs humans have had forever. So presumably that's where the witching stones kind of begin. They begin with just getting a little bit of extra help for ordinary life.
I think that is really a beautiful sentiment because we have always been, humans and we've always had the same kind of concerns, right? Will we maintain shelter? Will we have enough food? Will we be able to support ourselves and the people that we love? And that sentiment has just changed over time. When we were primarily farmers, it was about taking care of the earth and the animals and that, and now we're more corporate beings, and we're like, okay, we got to make sure that I got money in the bank so that X, Y, and Z. I want to divert a little bit because a question popped into my head where we were talking a little bit earlier about, the world being kind of a hellscape. And now we're talking about, protective stones. And what's coming to mind for me right now is all the protesting that's going on and all the people that are out there fighting for, you know, everything and against harm and against racism and against terrible things that are happening. Could you tell everyone in your best opinion if there were three stones that someone could carry with them if they're planning to go to a protest or any of these situations, what would you recommend to help them stay safe in those situations?
Yeah, so this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. I think one of my favorites for situations like this is labradorite. If I have to leave the house, I'm almost always wearing a piece of labradorite or safely have it tucked in my pocket. I've got some on my wrist right now as well. Labradorite is wonderful because it helps to work as a kind of selectively permeable membrane, allowing in the things we'd like and allowing us to release the things we'd not like. And it kind of filters out everything else. That beautiful labradorescence, that play of color that we see in it is the result of a kind of thin film interference. So it's made out of these very tightly bonded layers of varying thicknesses, each one kind of corresponding to a different wavelength of light. So very, very, very thin ones are going to scatter more blue light at us, filter that out or diffract it out, whereas the thicker ones are going to get into like the oranges and reds. Um, and because of that ability to selectively eliminate just this wavelength or that wavelength, it kind of confers a similar kind of quality to our own energy field. It enhances the innate intelligence of our essence to say, actually, this energy, this vibe is not for me, and I'm not going to take that in without sealing us up.
Mm,
It's so many beginners learning some kind of protective magic, protective energy work start by like sealing themselves in this opaque bubble of white light that nothing gets through. And my caution against that is open a bag of lettuce and then seal it up really tight and leave it in the fridge.
mm. Oh, gross.
Right? It has to breathe, and we do too energetically. So
Yeah.
labradorite gives us that kind of ability to take in and exhale the energies that don't work for us. I think another one that I definitely find useful in a situation like some kind of demonstration could be bronzite. Bronzite is this metamorphic rock. It's a variety of ferro and statite that forms under conditions of extreme pressures and temperatures. And most of it that you're going to encounter on the market is not super exciting to look at, but every now and then you find some really nice chatoyant ones. They've got this beautiful kind of bronzy shimmer, hence the trade name. And this is a stone that is grounding, stabilizing, centering. It invites a sense of clarity and tact to what we're doing. So it helps us respond rather than react. So not only does it protect us
Mm,
from outside forces that are not useful, a lot of iron-rich minerals have been associated with this kind of protection, but it does allow us to focus on like big picture security is not just, you know, telling the agitator to insert colorful expletives here. Maybe it's finding a way to de-escalate that situation. Maybe it is
right.
choosing to remain silent. Maybe it is choosing to, move a group of people. Maybe it is choosing to say, I'm actually going to sit this one out and donate to my local mutual aid for
Mm,
protesters who get captured. Like it's a stone that helps us really focus on feeling safety,
yeah,
not just protecting from external energies, and that often is reflected in our behavior and the choices we make, rather than
right.
just hoping a magical bubble of light is going to do its job.
Right. Right.
And absolutely use the magical bubble of light, but we want to ground it in real world kinds of things.
Right.
And then if there were one other stone that I would pick, we'll choose one from the witching stones. I might choose something like emerald.
Mm,
Um, Emerald has a lot of connection to protection throughout history. There's a lot of complex reasons why, but it's also a very alchemical stone. It's about transmuting things from one state to another. We think
mm,
of the Holy Grail as sometimes being described as an emerald that fell from the sky or a green stone that descended from heaven. We think of the Emerald Tablet with the instructions for the Magnum Opus, the great work, which results in the Philosopher's Stone and the resultant panacea, the elixir of life, the cure all. And for me, Emerald reminds us that the work we do should be rooted in love, and that the reason we seek to change things is because we love ourselves, we respect ourselves, we love our world. I care about what's happening in the US not because I'm fearful. I can also be fearful, but that's not the reason I care. I care because I love at least some of the guiding principles that our country was established on. I love the idea of liberty and equality for all. I love my communities and even the communities I don't belong to. Like as human beings, I think it is important that I cultivate love for this earth and all who reside therein.
yeah.
That means I care about protecting the waters, the trees, the animals, the marginalized people. I also care about the people who maybe are a little bit brainwashed and have joined a strange little cult.
Yeah.
I I care
Yeah.
about them. I don't agree
Yeah.
with them, but I care enough to make magic, to make change, in hopes that, maybe they will act from a space of love instead of fear as well. And
Mm,
so Emerald can be a really powerful ally for that, but it's also a torchbearer, a way shower, a guide that helps light the way for future change. And it does this through this kind of radical self-love. If we envision emerald as the gem in the crown of Lucifer that fell when he fell from heaven, it's not just a precious green rock that got knocked out of a piece of jewelry, but it symbolizes the descent of light into matter, the the choice for consciousness to incarnate is a conscious one in some retellings of this myth, and the descent of Lucifer, literally meaning light bearer, light bringer, phosphoros in Greek, um, is the idea that matter is inspirited. The very fact that we exist is what makes us worthy of that kind of love, the kind of light, the unconditional wisdom and support that comes from the divine. You matter because you are matter.
mm,
There's no period there. There's no but, there's no if, there's no when. You matter when you achieve this, when you look like this, when you weigh this amount, when you make this much money, when you cross this many things off your to-do list, when you get this much sleep, when you drink this much water. no, you matter. That's it. And when we live in a world that is constantly bombarding us with messages about why we aren't good enough, why we aren't successful enough, why we're never going to make it, choosing to say, actually, I love myself just as I am. I'm willing to be a better human, but I'm still worthy as I am. Then we kind of ignite this this flame, this torch within us that is like the light of Lucifer's crown, and we start a rebellion. We start to disrupt the status quo, like we see embodied in that apocryphal myth, not actually found in any scripture. And for me, that is a symbol for the change I hope to see in the world. That if I can shine my light, if I can even just show one other person that they matter, we're gonna create waves.
Yeah,
And that is some of the most powerful magic there is.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I really take that, what you just said, because it hit me very hard that you matter because you are matter and we are all matter, right? And so if I matter because I am matter and I'm speaking to you, you are also matter and you matter. And then the ripple effect of seeing ourselves this way, seeing our neighbor this way, seeing even the person who, like you said, might be fighting against the things that I believe in as someone who also matters. Um, Creating that commonality because we are all made out of the same stuff, you know? And I think bringing it back to that, if more people could see the reality in that, I think we would have a lot less discord, right? Okay, we're going to take a break because now I want to cry. Um, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from our wonderful sponsors, and we will be back in just a moment with Nicholas Pearson. We're back with the incredible Nicholas Pearson. Um, you just made my heart all warm and fuzzy, and it's so refreshing to just sit and chat with someone like-minded, but then also for you to kind of bring that sort of perspective. Um, that we matter because we're matter. So I love that so much, and I definitely want to get back to talking about your new book. But I want to thank you for that and what you said, because I think a lot of us need to hear that. Um, I think we all feel a little powerless right now, looking at the world the way it is and going, well, I don't matter. What I say doesn't matter. What I do doesn't matter. Where I go doesn't matter, but it does. So I want to thank you for that reminder. Okay, let's get back to you and the witching stones. And we're talking a lot about the history, right, of humans or pre-humans using stones. First of all, I love the little buns on as a kitchen witch, like putting that sympathetic magic of using that rock or that fossil as a symbol for the abundance of having enough bread. I just love that so much. Um, so that's more of the history. Could you explore a little bit more about the ways stones were used historically? Maybe even closer history, right? So the ancient stuff, but like 100 years ago, 50 years ago, what were people doing? And is it the same as what we're doing now with stones and crystals and such?
I often talk about or frame the modern kind of crystal movement as a link or several links in a chain that extends back to the beginning of time.
Mm.
So there are going to be some things that are really recognizable, and some things maybe less so. When it comes to some more recent folklore, into astonishingly recent decades, you find some bits of stone magic, stone folk magic that has remained unchanged for a really long time. Some prime examples we can see in things like flint, the use of so-called elf shot or thunderbolts or thunderstones, which are going to be lithic artifacts, tools like arrowheads and spear points and axe heads that get dug up out of the earth, and they're attributed to a mythological origin rather than just going, oh, right, people lived on this land a long time before us. They made things out of flint. It's like there's this mass cultural amnesia across many parts of the world. And so there is a kind of invented origin story for these flints. But until the middle of the 20th century, in rural parts of the UK, for example, you still found people using these flint objects in ways that were identical to their uses in the medieval period. We see them
Mm.
carried or worn for protection, maybe hung from the eaves of the home. Um, you might tie them to a harness of a given animal or hang them from, some part of the barn for protection. Similarly with hagstones. Oh, so much hagstone folklore. I mean, I don't think I've ever met a witch who doesn't love a hagstone.
Yeah.
And the kinds of things we do with them, like hang them from a pretty ribbon over the bed to protect from nightmares, this is an unchanged tradition that goes back a really long time.
Yeah.
The act of these kind of uncanny queer stones that are naturally perforated. Humans have loved these for a long time. There is an unsubstantiated theory that naturally perforated rocks might be the very first stones worn as beads or ornaments.
I
We
mean,
we
that would
can't
make sense.
Right. We can't prove or disprove that. Um, it's very possible organic materials might have preceded that, but they did what organic materials do and decomposed.
Right.
Um, so again, we can't prove or disprove that based on the paucity of evidence that exists today. But hagstones have been used as a kind of symbol or portal to the other world, and I know plenty of folkloric witches and tradecrafters who use hagstones in very similar kinds of ways. I myself have some hagstone magic that is used in, we'll say, some pretty similar functions. When it comes to something like salt, again, coming back to a really ubiquitous ingredient in our magical cabinets, as well as our culinary cabinets, which are sometimes and frequently one and the same.
Yeah.
Um, we don't think of salt as a stone, but it absolutely is.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
rock salt, it's right there in the name.
Uh-huh.
And while not all salt that we use culinarily is rock salt, a majority is not. It is still, when naturally derived, constitutes a mineral. It's an evaporite, forms by the evaporation of brines or hypersaline waters, whether that's happening at the seashore or in shallow inland bodies of water or from underground brine deposits. It's
Mhm.
still technically a mineral. Sometimes we hasten that process. And the things that we have done with halite throughout history are also astonishing, similar to the things that we do with salt in magic today. The notion of curing meats and
Mhm.
vegetables,
Mhm.
cure as in to heal, we were curing them of their ability to cause illness.
Mhm.
Salt is used in acts of blessing, which cures us, protects us against harmful energies. Therefore, it has been used in all manner of healing rites.
Mhm.
Um, we've got the kind of myth of the salarium argentum, the salt salary, or the um, salt silver, we might say, silver for salt, which was a stipend allegedly given to Roman soldiers, either paid out directly in salt, but more than likely was more like kind of prorated amount of pay to cover
Right.
whatever the current cost of salt was. So your salary was adjusted for whatever the market value of salt might be.
Mhm.
And so it's associated with abundance magic. You find
Mhm.
ornate salt cellars in use in high society to symbolize wealth, and where you were positioned at the table relative to the salt cellar said a lot about what the host thought of his guests,
Mhm.
and also they would be positioned near it as well to symbolize that kind of wealth. And you find prosperity magic that exists with salt and similar things. When it comes to stuff like hmm, moonstone. Moonstone's kind of a curious case. When I started writing this book, I expected to find really substantial evidence of the magical use of moonstones prior to the
Really?
I expected to.
Yeah.
Now, given that setup, I'm sure you can imagine where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I did not find very much concrete evidence of what we call moonstones in either the kind of literary record nor in the archaeological record. It was really hard for me to find anything earlier than a couple traces of stuff in the Renaissance period.
Mm-hmm.
There are references to things that we would render as the word moonstone, selenites, for example, which is not to be confused with modern day selenite, even though they're spelled almost the same way. But whether that was the group of feldspars we call moonstone or not is really up for debate. They're sometimes described in a way that makes them sound like a moonstone or an opal or a selenite or gypsum, where sometimes they sound like they could be a form of jasper when we look at the written record. So it's hard to verify exactly what moonstone was. There there is some speculation that something called moonstone has been in use for upwards of 4,000 years, but to find material evidence like actual carved moonstones, moonstones strung as beads from that era. I have not been able to really verify that. So it's like the lore has been transposed
Yeah.
from what we used to call a moonstone to what we call them today. But the fact that modern mystics, witches, and healers are using them for divination, intuition,
Yeah.
ability, this comes straight out of like 2,000-year-old texts where they were used for prophecy. We see them being connected to the divine feminine also whatever that prototypic moonstone
Sure.
was, similar kind of vibe going on with that. So there's a lot in our kind of modern application that has very old roots, but it's obviously adapted to the modern day. And so the way the book is constructed, every chapter has these kind of three parts. We've got the stone. What is this substance or object?
Yeah.
How does it come to exist? In the case of a hagstone, it's not about what is it made out of, but what process was applied to some substance. In the case of, something like moonstone, it's about an optical phenomenon rather than a discrete chemical composition.
Right.
In the case of lead, it's how do we separate lead from its ores? How did that happen in human history? So we get the kind of geology and science out of the way, but also a smattering of history and language will go into that section. The middle part of every chapter is what does the kind of heavy lifting, is how I think I describe it in the intro. This is the lore.
Mhm.
And the lore is what is our written record? What does our material evidence show us? What do we have that might be preserved in folklore, in mythology, in medieval lapidary texts, in manuals of operative magic, and how can we kind of synthesize that and translate it to what we can understand about a stone's virtues or energy or agency. And then I kind of round out every chapter with a section called the craft, which is the how-to.
Yeah.
So there's more than 50, somewhere between like 50 and 55, I think,
Wow.
spells and rituals and remedies and recipes that involve these witching stones. Everything from amulets and charms that you can make to wear or carry or hang. There are oil recipes. There are two incense recipes in the book. There's all kinds of things from very simple folk magic to slightly more complicated ritual elements.
So I want to go back because you mentioned lead, and I want to talk about metal a little bit because we're running a little bit out of time, but I want to talk about metal because you don't generally see metal in a book like this. Why did you choose to put metal in this book? And
Uh,
what can we expect different from what we would normally think of metal in terms through this lens?
So in the early stages of development for this book, I knew straight away that I was going to talk about metals. I thought it was going to be plural. It didn't end up being plural. It was too broad a category, and to try to fit more than one in took away from other things I wanted to include.
Mm,
So lead got first billing on that list because of its magical properties, because of its ritual use being so well documented. One of the most widespread ritual objects that we have from a pretty wide span of history are lead curse tablets, called defixiones or defixio in the singular. Um, and these defixiones are often inscribed with any number of elements, non-semantic symbols, things that are not linguistic in origin, barbarous words and holy names that also don't necessarily generate a sentence. And then they could be bits of poetry, simple requests, really horrific things that you wish would happen to your enemy involving their bowels, in some cases in public. And they're often for very, very real purposes. So
Right.
and so slighted me. I wanted, 12 of these things, and he took my money, and when I opened the box there were only 10, and he effectively stole from me. So I wish blight upon his crops, or whatever it might be.
Wow.
So and so stole my wife, and may horrible things happen to them. And at first we see lead being used probably because it was easy to get. Of
Yeah.
all of the metals in human history, lead is, as far as we can tell, the first one that is smelted from ore. And part of that is just because it melts real easily. If you happen to build a campfire on a rock with lead-rich ores in it, you will see pools of molten metal emerging from that.
Wow.
And if we go back far enough in human history, before metalsmithing, before metallurgy is a honed craft, it's by accident that we get a lot of great discoveries. So it is the first ore
Wow.
we worked. And so it melts at a low point. It's very easy to hammer out into sheets. It's easy to inscribe on. That's why we have pencil lead, even though it's graphite today. It was at one point just bound up,
Yeah.
wrapped lead. And we use lead for a lot of things that we should not anymore. It is
True.
right. But the other reason that I really wanted lead to be in this book is because I needed to have a chapter where we could really confront the, shall we say, the more confrontational side of magic.
Okay.
Witchcraft is not for the faint of heart. Cursing has been a part of the magical experience around the world probably since there has been magic. In other words, always. The idea that these things are born usually out of injustice also matters to me. And
Mm.
so this chapter focuses on the kind of malefic side of minerals. And we owe it to ourselves and one another as magical practitioners to not sweep that under the rug. It's so easy to go, crystals are such a new agey love and light practice, but the truth is they are not.
Yeah.
Um, in the absence of lead on the island of Cyprus, there are dozens of selenite curse tablets that have been recovered. People engraved similar kinds of curses to be lobbed at their enemies via selenite, a stone that we would associate with, all these good vibes and, high vibe kind of stuff. And historically, that is not always the case. So having a chapter where we can, one, recognize that metals are important mineral resources
Absolutely.
and are magical as well. And two, to have a chapter where we can kind of concentrate this idea of how magic handles oppression,
Mm.
injustice, inequity through the lens of the
Mm.
baneful workings. And when we, there's an expression, I'm sure a lot of witches will have heard some version of this. Um, a witch who cannot curse cannot cure, a witch who cannot hex cannot heal. There's a bunch of those going around. We really have to understand the kind of poisonous, venomous, baneful side of magic, because those are the energies that we seek to confront and undo.
Absolutely.
If we only focus on the love and the light, we don't know how to step into the shadow. And lead becomes this kind of mirror for doing that in some ways. And so I have a whole chapter on lead accordingly.
Such so much information. So much information. And there's like 17 more questions I want to ask you, but we don't have any time left. Um but I do want to drive home that point of, yeah, it's not all fucking love and light, people. Okay. And I'm not saying go out there and curse everybody that, cut you off in traffic. But what do you think it is when you literally say, like, oh, damn that person who just cut me off in traffic? You're spewing a little curse at them. Like, whether you realize it or not, we are not all, flowers and daisies and rainbows as humans. That's not, as you put it before, like that's not really the human experience. And we don't live in a world like that. So I'm not saying go out and hurt people or whatever, but I am saying it is important, as you said, to understand that side of magic. And when we're talking about, minerals and stones and crystals, for me, these are really earthen. This is earth magic at its purest. And the earth is full of turmoil, right? The planet itself, when you think about how it was formed and, the atmosphere and the weather, and, you know, we have volcanoes, we have hurricanes, we have tornadoes, we have massive, massive oceans, and all of that is turmoil and chaos. And so you have to understand the turmoil and chaos so that you can then live within it and through it and come out of it on the other side, right? So it makes sense to me that you would have that in this book as well. I do want to ask you another question. um so we've talked a lot about uh salt, which I love because I'm a kitchen witch, so obviously I have lots of salt in my kitchen. What are other things that I might want to have in my practice of kitchen witchery? I mean, okay, so I'm thinking now through the lens of Nicholas Pearson of what's in my kitchen. And I've got tons of different salts for cooking. I do have granite countertops. So I definitely have always kind of worked with the vibration of the granite. I live in New Hampshire. It's the granite state. We have lots and lots and lots of granite here. And it's very powerful. You can feel it if you're paying attention. What else should I be working with in my kitchen?
I think through that kind of kitchen witchery lens, there are probably rocks closer to home than we imagine. Think of those beautiful slate charcuterie boards or marble rolling pin or, all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of stuff that are earthy goodness that we could bring in. But also think about the metals that you cook with.
Yes.
The copper, the steel derived from iron, aluminum if you got to. Even like the enamel and ceramic coatings on things are of mineral origin. Sometimes the magic isn't about bringing in something, but seeing what was already there. Think about the gypsum in the plaster of your walls. Think about the copper wiring in your home.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are elements that we can connect to. Ice is crystalline, and we use that in a number of ways for culinary magic. So, if we wanted to like specifically find implements or accents for a kitchen, I have a little teeny, I hesitate to call it a shrine because it is so little. In the already very full windowsill above our sink, I have a couple of fossils. One of them is one of these little fossil sea urchins that I borrow some inspiration from my best friend Ashley. She has a proper like little shrine in her kitchen because she loves kitchen magic as well. And I rub it with some cooking fats. So maybe that's butter, maybe that's olive oil, maybe that's whatever you got. I've got some fossil-laden limestone from Florida because that is the rock under my feet. If I just dig far enough anywhere in Florida, I'm probably going to
Yeah.
find some version of that. So I keep a couple pieces up there because it really ties me to the land. And then, just start to imagine the energy of the space that you'd like and really be intentional with what you want in there.
Yeah, I love that. I often, when people are asking me, like, what are tools that they should have in the kitchen, I always say things that are of, natural elements, right? So I'm a big wooden spoon person, obviously, but metal, metal pans, metal pots, copper, of course, and all of that for me in my work, it's conductive, right? Like it has its own energy. The I like that you mentioned the rolling pin. That's a really good one. They have their own energies and they're going to bring their own personality to whatever you're doing, right? Which is what we learn. What I've learned from working a lot with crystals is, they have their own energy, and sometimes you just gotta back up and be like, okay, buddy, you're just gonna do what you're gonna do. But also they help to conduct the metals in particular help to conduct that energy. And so you don't get like if you're using something plastic where it just stops and now you're void of your vibrational field, right? um Nicholas, you're so amazing. I could talk to you about this stuff forever. um Okay. If people want to find you and they want to buy your book and they want to stalk you online and learn everything about you, where do they go?
Well, anyone who would like a copy of the book is now available nationwide. So your favorite local independent bookstore is a great place to get started. Any of the big chains or retailers in person or online, of course, are going to have access to it. If you want a signed copy, um, you can get that from me. So my website is theluminouspearl.com. It's got my calendar of events. You can send it from my newsletter on there, which I struggle to send out even twice a month some months, but that's usually what I aim for. So a couple times a month, I'll give you a rundown of my upcoming events, maybe a little article or extra little practice that's in there. Um, so that'll be a great way to just kind of keep tabs on me. I am less active these days than normal, but you can also find me on Instagram in particular, but generally on social media at the Luminous Pearl.
And we will put all of your information on the show notes so everybody can click and follow and like and share and buy your book, buy your book, buy your book. I mean, this book is really, really cool, but all of your books are amazing. Like the amount of knowledge and the amount of time and research that you have put into this particular work is really unparalleled. So if anybody wants to know anything about crystals, rocks, stones, minerals, all the things we do, just get a Nicholas Pearson book because you should have at least two of them on your shelf at any given time for reference. Like that's just the reality. Nicholas, you're amazing. Final question. Are you ready? Have you been thinking about it since last time?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. If you could have me cook you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
Mm. You know, it is autumn and Florida is just well, my part of Florida is just beginning to feel that seasonal change. It is the middle of the day and I have a window open in the house. Like that's a big deal for
Big deal.
us
Yeah.
after a scorching hot summer. And I think I would request some kind of wonderful magical stew.
A stew.
Yeah, something like simmering in a cauldron, um, vegetable stew. Maybe it's veggie chili. I'm vegetarian, so it's like really
Yes.
the thing. But something along those lines, that would be it. And then we can let it simmer and stir it with a wooden spoon. And
In a big copper pot.
yeah. Sprinkle in
That
some extra salt.
That's amazing. A vegetable stew. I do like for me in New Hampshire, it is cold right now. It's like 51 degrees and it's bright and sunny outside and the breeze is blowing and it is a perfect October day. And all I want is soup. So finding an easy vegetable stew recipe for you. The other night I made a vegetarian butternut squash soup with ginger and it was outstanding.
That
I would just make a bunch of different soups for you. Like I'd be like, here, try it. I make a really good vegetarian chili with sweet potatoes and black beans.
mm.
Now I'm hungry. Nicholas, you are amazing. Everyone go check out theluminous.pearl.com. Uh, Nicholas is incredible. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your knowledge, your work, and your dedication to the work. We need people like you in the community, and that's just the truth. Um, thank you for being here
Thank you for having me.
always. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude.